Muslims also believe that Musa, or Moses, may God's peace and blessings be upon both of them, was also a prophet of God. And their stories are mentioned in the Quran by way of a reminder, by way of a teaching to us. Quran is to be a moral guideline. It's to show us how we should live and how we should behave in our life. But yet, when the Quran is talking about historical data, what we find again and again that it proves to be accurate. And there are some accuracies, telling little accuracies that actually, if one thinks about it, are truly remarkable. And it stands as a challenge to the human intellect. How does this information come to be so remarkably accurate in the Quran? From where was the Prophet Muhammad gathering this information? A man who was himself illiterate, who could not read, who could not write. He didn't go to university. They didn't have Egyptology as a field of study at that time. The knowledge of hieroglyphs was lost hundreds and hundreds of years before the time of the Prophet Muhammad. So how come when the Quran mentions about Joseph, Joseph refers to the leader of the Egyptian people at the time as king? The term Pharaoh or Pharaoh is not mentioned in relation to Joseph and the ruler of Egypt. It is mentioned in relation to Moses and the ruler of Egypt, and Moses calls the ruler of Egypt Pharaoh. But Joseph does not call the ruler with whom he is interacting and who he acts as an advisor and a guide. He doesn't call him Pharaoh. Islam is the truth. And we're talking about amazing historical facts in the Quran. We were mentioning before the break how Joseph, or Prophet Yusuf, as he is mentioned in the Quran, alayhi salam, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, he talks to the ruler of Egypt and uses the term king. He never uses the term Pharaoh. Now, if we examine the date timeline of when Joseph or Prophet Yusuf was in Egypt, we find that the dynasty ruling Egypt at the time was in fact a dynasty called the Hyksos. Now, the Hyksos dynasty was actually a Semitic dynasty, and they did not use the normal native Egyptian terms. In other words, they did not think of themselves or refer to themselves as pharaohs. However, the Hyksos dynasty, by the time of Moses, was replaced. So by the time it came to the time of Moses, the Semite Hyksos dynasty was removed and was replaced by a native Egyptian ruler. And the native Egyptians called their rulers Pharaoh, mentioned in the Quran. Now, this is a very, very telling but amazing, detailed accuracy. It's amazing because you will not find the Bible making such a distinction. Now, in terms of a historical document, a sort of diary of events of, your ancestors who lived thousands of years ago and writing down what they did, when Moses comes to Pharaoh and he shows him the miracles and the signs that God has given him, the staff, which when Moses throws it, it turns into a snake, and he draws his hand out and it comes shining white. In the dialogue and the discussion and the debate, we could say, between Moses and Pharaoh, one of the things that Pharaoh says very arrogantly, he says, "O Haman, build me a lofty tower that I may look upon this God of Moses." Now, let's examine this. It's very interesting. Pharaoh is saying, "O Haman," he's talking to somebody, a particular individual, Haman. And he says to this Haman that I want you to build me a lofty building. And the reason is, so he claims, I can look upon this God of Moses. He understood that God was the Most High. God was above the heavens. And in his arrogance, he thought, and how arrogant that is in respect to modern knowledge that we have, that he could build a tower and look upon the God of Moses. Now, some Christians and some Christian Orientalists had pointed out that the word Haman, or the term Haman, is a name that is given to a Persian ruler or a Persian courtier in the Bible some 1,200 years after the time of Moses, of these dictionary of hieroglyphical terms. in order to try and find out if there was such a person as Haman in ancient Egypt. Now, although there was a lack of information in English, they did find a book in German. And looking through this book, they came across a truly remarkable discovery. Surely enough, there was indeed a particular title of a person. And this title was exactly that, Haman. Now, when we look at who was Haman, what was this title? What did this Haman do? In other words, it was a position. It wasn't the name of a particular individual necessarily. It was the name of a position in Egyptian society. And what was this position? Haman is the master of the quarry of those people who build with stone. Now, isn't that truly remarkable? That Pharaoh is saying, O master of the quarry, O master of the people who build the stone, build for me a lofty tower that I may look upon this God of Pharaoh. You will not find this anywhere in the Bible. You will only find this in the Quran. The knowledge of reading hieroglyphs, as I have mentioned, was lost hundreds of years before the time of Prophet Muhammad, may God's peace and blessings be upon him. Yet in the Quran, Pharaoh is using an exactly accurate historical term. The question you have to answer is, from where did the Prophet Muhammad, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, get this information? From where did he get such amazing knowledge? I think you know by now. Surely the penny must be starting to drop. Surely the cogs must be starting to line up in place. Surely the realization must be dawning upon you, if it is not already, that indeed the Quran is the revelation from Allah, the creator of the heavens and the earth, for the benefit and the mercy of all of mankind. Now, the next subject that we want to deal with is a truly fascinating subject, and it will take a couple of episodes for us to go through it. And that is called the witnessing of the people of the book. That's what I've called it. And it's also dealing with the prophecies of the Prophet Muhammad, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, in the Bible. Now, who are the people of the book? The people of the book, according to the Quran, as they are called, Ahlul Kitab, means essentially the Jews and the Christians. First and foremost, it means the Jews and the Christians. They are Ahlul Kitab. Why? Because they have a scripture. The Jews have the Torah, the Christians have the Injil, or combined together, it's what we know as the Bible. Now, there are some other scriptures, of course. For example, the Jews do have other scriptures called the Talmud. And for the Jews, that is a very important collection of documents. And ancient Christians, before the time of the Council of Nicaea, which was held about 345 years after the time of Jesus, when the Gospels we know today as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were canonized and formalized as being part of the Bible. In fact, it's important to understand, what does the Quran teach about the Bible? The Quran teaches us that the Jews and Christians have scripture with them, and they have enough scripture with them in order for them to be able to know the truth. However, the scriptures they have been altered and corrupted. Either things have been added, or things have been deleted, or things have been adjusted in one way or another. So this is what the Quran says. For example, in the second chapter of the Quran tells us, woe to those who write the book with their own hands, and they say this is from Allah, and it is not from Allah, and they know that well. So the Quran says that there are people who are saying, our book is from God, our Bible is from God. But it is a book that they have changed, and they have changed it with their hands. And by the way, they are doing that until this day. And they claim it is from God, and they know perfectly well that it is not from God. So woe to them for what their hands write, and woe to them for the small gain that they get thereby. However, that doesn't mean that we can't find information in the Bible. It doesn't mean that we can't glean some information out there. We believe, as Muslims that there is enough truth left in those scriptures through which and by which a sincere and honest Christian or a sincere and honest Jew could come to know the truth of monotheism, that indeed there is only one God. And this is what we believe was the message of Jesus. We do not believe that Jesus called people to worship himself. No, he called people to worship the creator of the heavens and the earth, just like Moses called people to worship the creator of the heavens and the earth alone, and to submit themselves to his divinely revealed guidance. This is what we call Islam, sincere submission to the will of the creator of the heavens and the earth. So we're going to be talking about some of those people in the past from the people of the book, Jews and Christians, who themselves have recognized the prophethood of Prophet Muhammad and testified to that. So join us for the next exciting episode of the proof that Islam is the truth. Until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and blessings of God and his guidance be with all of you.